Hey guys, welcome back to the third part of the series, Portrait Drawing for Beginners. In this episode, I'm going to show you how I use the technique of layering to build up the skin tones of the portrait and then use that same procedure to draw the hair. Like with the other videos, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of the process before we begin working on the portrait. In this demonstration, I'll be using this gradient patch to show you how to build up the layers. Since the portrait, at this point, already has the foundation layer in place, I went ahead and applied that layer to this patch so that we'll be starting in the same place in this demo. Also, I went ahead and put down a darker strip in the center so that you will be able to see the contrasting tones as we build up the layers with the different pencils. On top of the foundation, I'm going to move up to my next darkest pencil. In this case, it's a 2H. Like we did in the previous video, I will start at the darkest area of the gradient and work my way outward in the direction of the highlight. Just so you know, for the technique that I will be demonstrating in this video, I recommend that you use at least 3 pencils. I have found that 3 to 6 pencils will give the optimal range for creating those realistic values and textures in your portrait. Now, once I've extended this gradient past the range of the pencil, I will revert back to my lighter pencil and go over the top of the gradient that I just put down. This will even out the tones and give a more blended and refined look. After I use the darker pencil for the next layer, I will go back through the pencils all the way back to my lightest one. This will allow me to extend the gradient slightly each time I step up to the next layer. Ultimately, the goal is to cover the entire area with graphite so that we don't leave parts of the drawing flat. You'll notice as you try to extend the range of the gradient, you'll sometimes mistakenly space your lines apart. This is normal, and you can simply use your kneaded eraser to clean it up a bit. But just to note, most of the lines will get blended out smooth when we reach the blending stage of the drawing. All I'm doing here is going out as far as I can with my gradient by switching back and forth between my lightest and darkest pencils. I'm using the lightest pencil over the dark to help blend and make the transition smooth. At this point, I'm going to stop right here with this demonstration and move on to the portrait so that you can see this process in action. Like in the demo, I already have the foundation layer in place. So now we will start with the darkest areas and start to build up our value even more. I'm using the 2H to start out with. Just keep going back over your values with your pencil and building them slowly. This is a slow process that takes a bit of patience, but the end result will be worth it, I promise. Just like before, we're going to rinse and repeat. Start with your darkest areas and go back over what you've just built up with the previous pencil, being sure to extend your gradient values out like I showed you in the demo. Eventually you'll get to the point to where you can't get any darker without bearing down too hard. When you reach this point, you'll know it's just about time to go up to that next pencil. But before you do, make sure that you go back to your previous pencil and extend your gradient out a little farther and then move on to the next pencil. Okay, now it's time to move up to the next pencil. In this case I'm using an HB, and like before I'm going back to the darker areas and I'm just building those values up slowly. Once I get into my softer pencils, I can then start darkening up the eyebrows and begin outlining some of the facial hair. And since I'm already using the HB pencil, I'll go ahead and start defining my hair. This is so that I'll have a good starting point when I graduate up to the next pencil. And if you recall back in part 2 of this series when I showed you how to do the patches, I showed you how to apply the gradients to the line weight. This will need to be the technique that you keep in mind when you're laying out the hair. Now that I'm done with the HB pencil, I'll revert back to using my 4H so that I can get into some of those areas that I don't have any value at this point. I will do this until I've blended the darker gradient into an even tone. As we graduate to the next pencil, I want you to remember that we're trying to work outward towards the highlights until we cover all of the surface of the paper. I don't want you to leave your drawing looking flat and uninteresting, so be sure to keep that in mind when you're extending your gradients. Since I'm using the 2B pencil, I'm going to go ahead and start on the first layer of the hair. Now, when drawing the hair, keep in mind that it's a feature just like any other part of the face. It has dark values and light values. So treat it the same way you would treat the skin, and start with the dark areas and work towards the light. Just keep in mind that in most cases the contrasting highlights will use less of a gradient than the skin. Another tip is to draw the hair in bunches as opposed to trying to draw individual strands. In some cases you may need to draw a single hair. If you do, be sure to remember how to create the gradient line that I showed you back in part 2. Also, you might find it helpful to turn your paper so that you can reach areas of your drawing without putting your hand in an awkward position. Much like the hair on the head, in drawing the facial hair, I will use short and random strokes in the direction that the hair flows, while remembering to shade in between the bunched up areas. Also, don't be afraid to use your erasers to create highlights in the hair. I will be demonstrating this in more detail in part 4. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. In part 4, I will be showing you how to blend the shading and apply the last layer of graphite to the skin and complete the hair. So be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, so that you won't miss the next addition to this series. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.